Hello,
Hello,
welcome.
everybody. Welcome to Relationship Fun and Games.
And Fights Clean, Sex Dirty TV. We are super excited to launch today the 4th season of Fights Clean, Sex Dirty, and absolutely delighted that we have Jason Gaddis and his wife, Ellen Bader, here to see us today. We're so glad to have you guys. Raj, you want to say anything? I want to ask them a few questions about their relationship.
Yeah, well, we're excited to kick off season 4, the season of play, as we enter into summertime here. As you might know, we talk about having a playful, peaceful, passionate relationship, and we divide our seasons into those 3 categories. And we're back at the season of play.
Yeah, it's summertime, right? Well, it's not quite summer, but it's almost summertime. And it's time to have some fun and get outside and have a really good time with your beloved.
And if you're new to our show, we air 8 episodes in each season, and this is episode 1 of season 4. And we air at the same time each week, 5:30 Pacific on Wednesdays.
And each week we'll go back and forth between how to keep the fights clean and how to keep the sex dirty. Raj, you want to go ahead and share them the screen there so they can see our little graphic. So this week we're going to talk about how to keep the fights clean before. You know, what do you do in advance?
Great. So each week, as Gabby was saying, we alternate between how to keep the fights clean and the sex dirty, and we organize our content into these different time frames where you are looking at how do I keep the fights clean and the sex dirty.
Because what you're going to do before, like we're going to talk about tonight, is not what you're going to do right in the middle in the heat of an argument. You know, this is laying the groundwork tonight. So, but before we get into the tips tonight, we're going to give you, a tip from us. We're going to really dive into some great suggestions and agreements that Jason and Ellen have come up with. I really love how they're worded, and we're just totally in alignment and excited to share those with you. But first, let's just find out a bit about Ellen and Jason personally. I know we have some similarities in common, but Jason is of the Smart Couple podcast, and Ellen herself both has a website that supports, women that are really balancing the traditional role of mother and wife, and also, having their own career and, being a modern woman in the world. And she's also working with couples. She's a therapist, a psychotherapist living in Boulder, and working with couples to enjoy what we would refer to as a playful, peaceful, passionate relationship. But I'll let you, Ellen, tell them a bit more about who you're working with these days.
Thanks, Gabby.
So tell us something about your work, your relationship. We just want to get a sense of who you two are. I know you've been together about as long as we have, but why don't you let us know a little bit about how you guys got together?
Sure. Yeah, we got together many years ago in grad school. We met in the hallway, and we didn't kind of connect for like a year after that. And right from the start, when we finally started dating, it was we just kind of locked horns, and we're both training to be therapists at the time, and so there was a lot of analysis, which led to a lot of paralysis and
a lot of processing,
a lot of talking in circles.
And we were both coming out of old relationship patterns we wanted to change, but we didn't really know how to do things better yet. We were just sort of like, it's like stabs in the dark at sort of what would be more just healthy and fulfilling for us. So
an awareness of what you wanted, but not necessarily how to get there.
Yeah,
no clue how to get there. I thought I knew. I thought I was like, dude, I'm learning all these awesome tools. I kind of know what's going on here. And 4 hours later, in frustration and shutting down, it's like, maybe I don't know what I'm talking about.
Yeah. So we worked a lot out in those first few years, and broke up a few times, and it's totally over, done, and then we'd sort of find each other a few months later in a new place, sort of with new capacities, and able to see each other and ourselves a little more fully, and finally got to a place where the commitment felt really right and good, and it's kind of incredible how since then that just we haven't questioned our being together or our relationship. So
yeah, we fought pretty much for the first several years around security, like, are we doing this or are we not?
Yeah.
And once I landed with 2 feet in, the fights changed and became about something else. But it was nice relief to not be fighting about security anymore. Like, is this 2 feet in? Like, what's going on?
What's that that expression, something like 100% is easy and 99% is a bitch. You know,
Yes.
you know, if you're,
Very true.
and that was one thing that was so great when we got married. It was just, it is a different dynamic. I often say it, you know, it shifted from when you'd get upset and you'd say, I don't need this shit, to saying, you know what, this is our shit and we're committed to having a great life. So what are we going to do to bridge that gap?
Right.
Yeah. So we worked really hard for many years to find our way, and we got more and more efficient with fighting.
Yeah.
And to the point where, you know, this is what we do now, is we teach people how to have great relationships, because we really earned it.
Yeah.
Yeah, trial and error, and now you're here to make that possible for other couples and those that are, you know, I love it when single people are on the show, because, you know, we really like to promote a proactive attitude, as I'm sure you do as well, and you can't get more proactive than single and developing those skills, so when you do meet the next person, you know, you don't let an argument that really is something that's wanting to happen, that's going to be a gift to both of you, and because of old patterns or fears, you know, you kind of shut it down, or, you know, walk away from the relationship. There's a lot of good relationships people walk away from too soon, so all the better to get ready for the next one now.
Mm-hmm.
Agreed.
Yeah, and we'll be diving into that with one of our top tips today. The problem is the path.
The problem is the path. Yes, yes.
So before we dive in, let's share a little bit more about Jason and Ellen, right? And we'll bring up a little slide here to.
Well, I did go through their bios, but please do pull that up so people can see that. We actually have both of her websites up there, the Rearranged by Motherhood. I love that. You know, it acknowledges, you know, the little bit of, maybe sometimes a lot bit of chaos, and we don't have kids ourselves, so I really appreciate having parents and couples that are really having a great relationship with managing the challenges and the joys of being parents. My sister has 2 daughters and a stepson who's 16. Her daughters are 10 and 5. And I certainly know the challenges of not even just having relationship challenges, but even having time to spend on the relationship when you have 2 gorgeous, amazing, ever needing your attention beings in front of you all the time.
Mm-hmm. Totally.
Awesome. So let's dive in then. Let's get into the first tip that we have for the day.
Great. So today, again, the topic is how to keep the fights clean before. What are we going to do before an argument starts? You know, the nurturing space. And there's a lot of tips that we've talked about in the past. You know, season 1, we talked about context is king. Season 2, we talked about friction factors. You know, really take those repeat problems that you're having, those challenges, those friction factors, and how to translate those into those peace practices. And then last season, season 3, we shared my favorite relationship tip, the favorite relationship exercise, the shared relationship vision. So if this topic of how to keep the fights clean before is an important one for you, then go ahead and go back and take a look at those past seasons. And each one of those have a blog. The blog is really searchable. So we know that it's not just general relationship tips, but really what's going on for you right now. So if this is a special topic, you can go check those out there. But today, we have a new tip for you.
The problem isn't the problem.
Yes, this is a little bit of a tongue twister. Anyone who sees our work knows that I like alliterations. For one, they're playful, and 2, I love neuroscience, and it actually is shown that you will remember things more clearly if there were alliterations. So it's part fun, part memory tool we're working with. But the tongue twister is, you know, the problem isn't the problem. The problem is when you think the problem is a problem, because actually the problem is the path. And what that means is you have this choice. You can bring up resistance, blame, you know, and ultimately have separation be caused by the tension that comes up, or you can actually really lean into the growth, the intimacy, and the connection that's available.
And one of the amazing things with this whole concept is that those very same things that can lead you apart draws you closer together, which is totally counterintuitive. You know, we think that, oh, those fights, we shouldn't be having them. And I know, Jason and Ellen, you're going to be talking about this as well.
Yeah, the goal is not to avoid fighting. Yeah, we agree on that one, absolutely.
Yeah, and as the point shows here that perspective is powerful, and whether you choose the perspective of we shouldn't be fighting and these fights are a problem and we shouldn't be having them, or this fight is actually a path to greater intimacy, to up-leveling our relationship.
Yeah, a few reminders. One, if you're having a fight, it does not have to be a disaster. You don't need to avoid arguments, right? As Raj was saying, you can take a breakdown and turn it into a breakthrough. Now, I do remember once Raj and I, when we were engaged, this is in our breakup days, and I said after an argument had happened earlier in the day, we were cuddled up at night, and I said, I'm so glad that this breakdown no longer do our breakdown conversations lead to conversations about breaking up. And he was quiet. It was like, uh-oh. The whole thing kind of came to a screeching halt. So, but even that breakdown actually led to a breakthrough and had us get really clear on what is it that we want in our relationship. And we sat down and went for a year, every other week, with an Imago therapist to really lean in and find out, what is it that was really wanting, what was the lesson, what was the problem that was trying to show us the path. As my girlfriend Sasha calls it, she says, let your mess be your message.
Yeah, love that.
Yeah. I want to ask your opinion about this. I've just 1 minute to wrap this up. I want to remind people that I call this the wonder of the will of one. The marriage researcher John Gottman, he says that don't be afraid to be the one to love more and love first. A lot of people listening to this live or that are watching the replay, you might be watching this alone and you're not with your couple. Here we've got Jason and Ellen and we've got Raj and myself and we're here together. But don't let it discourage you if you're doing this on your own, because so much about your relationships are habits, and habits are all based on cues. And one person can change cues. So the wonder of the will of one is what I'm talking about here, is to really decide for yourself, are you willing to be the one? Are you willing to take responsibility that when a problem comes up, you're going to turn it around into the path and really lean into the lesson? And as Sasha, as I said, my friend Sasha says, have the mess be your message and let the problems be your path.
Yeah, and one of the things to consider there is that being right does get you nowhere, right? And if you're really willing to be responsible and be that one, you can, again, embrace this concept of the problem is the path, even if neither of you seems to be budging in the moment.
Now, Jason, I know that this tip kind of jumps in on some of your agreements to make. So, Raj, I'm not sure if you can maybe jump towards that slide, but anything you want to say about this in the context of the problem is the path?
Sure.
Or
yeah.
Ellen, of course.
I would add, I just love that if the wonder of the will of one, if I'm the one perceiving that there's a problem here and I want to do something about it, to stay silent and to stay quiet and resentful or hurt is probably not going to do anything. So I just love the power in one person to speak up and to speak truth and say, hey, this isn't working for me. I want something different here. I'm committed to you, and I want to work through this hard thing. So I just want to really, cheer that person on, if that's you listening, that you can do something. And if eventually you'll find out if your partner's up for it or not. But it's worth fighting for and speaking up.
Mm-hmm.
Ellen, anything you wanted to add about the problem being the path?
It's not as easy as it sounds. I guess I'll add that. In the moment when things feel hard or hurtful, it's hard to see that, but that's why what you guys are doing today is so important. It's sort of, you have to have these agreements or have these ideas going before you are in the midst of something, because that's when it's hard to get perspective. But you actually can do it if you've really agreed on something and thought about it. It is doable.
And if you do the agreements enough, then, it's, as I was saying before, it's all about habits. Raj has a business consultancy as well, and we really like to bring business practices to our relationship and relationship practices to our business. And we've just been studying a lot about habits and self-sabotage. And so, in fact, today I was just writing about, it does take practice. It's not easy. We like to say wonderful's worth it, but it's not easy. It's simple.
Yeah.
As simple as
Yes.
this.
But not easy. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, don't be negative. Don't blame, shame, and complain. Well, I get hangry sometimes,
Yeah.
and we have computer meltdowns.
Yeah.
And it goes out the window, but when you build those habits, it
Yeah.
can make a huge difference.
Yeah, I mean, the breakthrough is guaranteed if you're willing to break down and go through the fire. There's guaranteed a breakthrough on the other side.
Yeah.
You know?
True.
Yeah, I often like to say that love isn't just looking into each other's eyes. It's looking in the same direction. You know, because you are, you know, if you're creating this container for a long-term committed relationship, you're going to be changing and facing all sorts of obstacles. You know, you're changing, the world coming at you is changing. And so there has to be some commitment to partnership in that growth and development.
Definitely.
Yeah, and one of the things I really like to presence is that somehow magically this concept of if you're with the right person, it should be easy.
It shouldn't be this hard. That's what we hear. It shouldn't be this hard.
Yeah.
It's complicated.
Complicated.
No matter who you're
Yeah, and
with.
if there's really nothing else in your life that you do that is great that doesn't take some effort. You know, it really boggles my mind how relationships somehow got this whole sort of belief system that if you're with the right person, it's just great. That'd be awesome if you were just in the right business, if it were easy, right?
Right.
Yeah, but then there'd be no journey, right? You wouldn't have any muscles because work
Totally.
to get there.
Yeah.
Well, and really, you know, this idea of the problem being the path, it really dovetails actually perfectly into, you know, the main piece, what you were going to be talking about today with the context. Do you want to introduce that now with the context and your 8 suggestions?
Sure.
Sure. Why don't you start?
Yeah, Ellen and I just really are both very committed to personal growth and development. And that's like one of the bedrocks of our relationship. So the context is that we are completely committed to growing ourselves. And both of us are committed to that.
Mhm. Yeah. And so that we can support each other with our individual growth, and then also that translates as a couple to our relationship.
Yeah, so that when the inevitable challenges come up, we know that we can look in the mirror and work through them. If I'm not into growth and development, I might believe that it's up to my partner to make this better. Or, yeah, things should just magically be okay right now, and I shouldn't have to do anything. This should be easy, like we were just saying.
Right.
Yeah, we met a man in a bar watching a basketball game a month or so ago, and he has told us he had been married for 38 years. And being in the work we do, I always ask, well, are you happily married? And what are your secrets? You know, tell me how you've made that happen. And he essentially said, when I stopped blaming her and realized it was me,
That was great.
and she always, you know, it's like both people have to realize, oh, it's me, you know. And if you're both holding that, you know, not like a blame or self-loathing, you know, we all want to be coming from an empowered and empowering context, but blame is a very disempowering context
Absolutely.
for both of you.
Yeah, that's one of our,
Sorry.
right? It's just we're not going to blame each other. And we learned that one pretty early on, I'd say.
Yeah, it really got us nowhere. And we found that as hard as it is to take responsibility sometimes for sort of the, like, oh God, I did that, or I want to be mad at you, but really it's me right now that's the problem. As challenging as that is, it is empowering, because that's what I can change myself. I can address my own stuff, and that made a huge difference once we started really practicing that and doing that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Huge difference.
Yeah, and then he could come in and support me with something that I was taking responsibility for, rather than be the object of my blame.
Yeah, and you know, blaming just puts me in the defensive, right? Unfortunately, that's what us humans do. When we feel blamed, we get defensive.
Yeah.
So it just doesn't go anywhere.
What was that song? Gabby and I decided to have a blame-free day today, and I came up with some song. What was that tune?
Oh, I can't remember. It was a 70s, like, disco tune. It's really funny.
We'll have to remember.
We'll see if that comes. Maybe it'll come back to you.
Yeah.
But yeah, again, we're always playing games. So when we sensed just a little bit of tension this morning while we were doing some dishes and cleaning up after breakfast, we were like, okay, let's have a blame-free day today, and created a little song around it. And then I created another song. And we were kind of singing 70s tunes, but changing the lyrics so they were all about, you know, instead of blaming and shaming, making requests, you know, and being responsible.
Wow. Can you come into our house sometime?
Right. Just give us a little
Kitchen
tune in the
song.
kitchen.
Yeah.
We could use that
Well,
sometime.
the fundamental issues was really looking for where is that friction, and then if you, sometimes it's not appropriate, and you've got to feel into that and trust yourself. But levity really can grease the wheels, especially on the day-to-day friction of the bumping up against, the mundane and the, everyone's doing so much, kind of environment.
Mm-hmm.
And no one's feeling appreciated.
Right.
Yeah, humor is always going to
Humor
work.
is huge.
Usually, I mean, it's
Yeah.
just to break through, right? Because
Yeah.
I can get contracted, and humor is sometimes the only thing that'll cut through that.
Yeah. It's immediate relief sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Jason, would you like me to show the slide with the 8 agreements that you had?
I see number 3 here is no blame. Yes.
Yes.
That's probably
Yeah,
you could
yeah,
probably
we
make
can do
this a top 10 list and put no blame on there 3 times.
Okay, so before we're just suggesting that before you get into a fight, which is what this episode is all about, is to make agreements about how it's going to go down, because you're never going to avoid fighting. Fighting is just inevitable. Arguing, distancing, that's all inevitable in our world. So it's like, okay, cool. Given that that's going to happen probably forever, how are we going to navigate that?
Yeah.
So that's part of the context, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then number 1, we talked about growth and development, that if you're both growing and developing yourself, fighting isn't a problem, because you're going to learn something about yourself. Number 2,
Saying yes to conflict. So being willing to bring things up that like, oh, this is going to be touchy, or this may not be a good time, or you might be feeling all of your feelings about not wanting to disrupt connection, but we've just really realized we have to bring everything out, even the little things. We have to check out, even today, right before this, Jason said something to me. I hadn't asked him about his day, and you said something kind of like, oh, I finally asked him how his day went. He made a comment about it, and I was like, wait, are you genuinely upset I didn't ask you sooner? I had to know because I felt something there. And then he's like, no, actually it's fine, and I can drop it because I trust him. I know he's going to tell me the truth. So try to keep really up to date on even just the little things that I think a lot of people tolerate that actually really build up and create just sort of those minefields that you're like, oh, how do we get here? I didn't realize you were so upset about something. So just being willing to have those disruptions, even the little ones, they help.
I'm so glad you said that, because often it's really lowering your standard, or actually I guess it's saying having a low threshold would be a better way of saying it.
Yeah.
A low threshold for tolerating what that friction is, because so many times we've seen it before, I'm sure you have, with couples it's too late and there's like one person is done and the other person's trying to fix it.
Yeah.
And it's usually not a big thing, it's a lot of little things that add up until it's just a light switch and it's over.
Yeah.
And you don't want to be digging yourself out of these big holes. So if you don't, I often say if you sweep something under the rug, well, ultimately you're going to end up tripping over it and falling flat on your face.
Yeah.
So better to get out the dustpan and like wipe it up while it's a little thing, not have it be a problem later on.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's one of the like even just this last week, there were a couple of things that had built up in terms of little resentments or things that I'm like, oh, I'll talk to her about that later. And I just noticed that we were going from one of our most connected, intimate, fun, playful times quickly to this irritated with each other, like we were just snapping back and forth. It was like
usually around house guests.
Well, one of the things I love about this work is that you develop tools that you can continually sort of cleanse that out, because they really do build up this residue. It's almost like plaque, and
Totally.
Yeah.
and then you start really shutting down and not communicating at all. And it was amazing. Just 10 minutes this morning at breakfast, she said a few things, I said a few things, and it just really got it out. We were able to hear each other, and the connection was just immediate. So.
Yeah, nice.
Jason, you were going to say something there?
Well, we have I think it's tricky for some of us that might have grown up in homes where we tolerated a lot of tension.
Yeah.
So we might find ourselves in an adult relationship where tension is kind of normal, and so we'll put up with it. which you've got to learn to flex the muscle of growing there so that you put up with it less and less. I mean, we're both very sensitive,
Yeah.
and it matters to us to speak it as soon as it's happening, because it just doesn't work for our connection to have much tension.
Yeah.
And the thing is, if you're trying to avoid conflict, the irony is you're in conflict anyway with yourself and with this feeling and experience. So you can't
Can't
get away
avoid
from it. No matter how hard you try, and you can medicate or numb out or run away, it's still there. It's not going anywhere. So we may as well, what choice are you going to make? Deal with the conflict outwardly or inwardly? Like, you got to deal.
Yeah.
I love that, Jason, that concept of you're in conflict with yourself. Brian Franklin and Jennifer Russell, who have been on our show a few times, talked about this concept of being in an argument with someone like your partner when they're not even present.
You're like driving home, and by the time you got home, you've already had the fight with them.
And you're pissed off at them when you get home. So that inner conflict, like you can be having this argument with somebody inside your head, and you get just as agitated as if, more agitated because there's no resolution to it, right? It's a one-sided argument.
Totally.
Yeah, I mean, if they were to scan our brain, the same areas would be lighting up as if we were actually in a fight.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So yes to conflict, people.
Yeah.
Yes to conflict. It's going to happen. Let's get in there and let's learn how to do it. We never learned as kids, so got to learn somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Raj and I, as we said, this is the season of play, and Raj and I were looking at our goals around play, and we're actually taking on wrestling a bit. So it's like, we're gonna like get in there, and we were, just as you were saying there, we're like, okay, this is the conflict, let's bring it to the mat. We actually do have his and hers boxing gloves as well.
They're these big, like.
I have pink ones.
Like
he has black ones. Yeah.
Yeah, I think physicality is an excellent way to kind of play with the aggression and move things without talking about it. That can actually really work.
Yeah.
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 And
okay, so back to your
8 suggestions.
Yeah. So, and all these, by the way, can be agreements. You can frame these into, I agree to growth and development. I agree to say yes to conflict. I agree to no blame. So if you want to turn these into agreements, you're certainly welcome to. We sort of hit on number 3 plenty, I think. Number 4 is just speaking with care and respect. I mean, this is kind of a no-brainer, and it's amazing to me how many couples will sarcastically throw each other under the bus, make jabs.
Passive-aggressive.
Very passive-aggressive because there's a resentment going on. What's that?
Wait, have you been around a couple before and you just like wince a bit, like you hear them throw a low blow zinger, and you're like, oh my gosh! If I think to myself, if they say that in front of us, what do they say behind closed doors?
Sure.
People are mean to each other sometimes. Don't be mean, people. Be nice.
Yeah,
and it's
actually,
amazing.
that's how some people connect, right? They've created connection through sarcasm, and so neither one of them is speaking up, but that's how they're relating, and it's like painful to be around.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, it's amazing how we allow ourselves to speak with such little care and respect to the person that we're supposed to love the most,
Yeah.
And it's habit forming as well. One of the things Gabby has really taught me to do is, along these lines of speaking with care and respect, is to address the behavior, not say that a person is a certain way.
We separate the person from the behavior. Yeah. So there's no name calling. We've just like agreed that's like out of bounds. I can't say you're an asshole, but I can say, you know what, you're being an asshole right now. But there's a subtle distinction. I'm like, I think you're awesome. I don't know who and what's going on right now. You must be under stress and need some support. In fact, one of our tips is when someone's being kind of snarky with each other, instead of saying like, you're being negative, get off it, or why are you taking your stress out on me, which just doesn't go very well, we'll now say, do you need some loving?
Oh man, that is the biggest icebreaker or the tension breaker.
And I just can't help but laugh. And sometimes when I'm having a tough time, I'll say, yes, I need lots and lots of loving. Stat.
It's the last thing you want to, because you're like, stop being such a pain in the ass. But they need some loving. They're going through something.
It is even reminding yourself that when your beloved's having a tough time, they're still your beloved. They're still awesome. And we all, act out when we're having a tough time or under-resourced.
Yeah.
Totally.
Jason, before you continue with your list, I just want to mention that our Join the Hangout button is live. So for anyone joining us here live on the show, you can enter the Hangout with us. just by clicking that Join the Hangout button under the video player. You may need to refresh your browser window to make sure the button is active.
Yeah.
So you can come in here on the show, and if you have any questions or comments, you can throw them in the comment window, and you can even request to be unmuted, and we'll get you into the conversation here. Okay.
Great. So for no sarcasm.
Yeah, just one quick story on that. We were
Sure.
coming back from a road trip from Utah. We were coming back, right? And you said something about you felt like I was being sarcastic about something.
Yeah, it had kind of gone on. I think we were still on the trip, actually. It was towards the end. So we were grading you guys were saying something about kind of, how did we do today? Assessing an argument you'd had, and we were sort of assessing, like, how are we doing here? And I hadn't addressed that, like, he'd been making some comments that felt sarcastic. It was very subtle.
Super
It
subtle.
was around, for whatever reason, whatever's going on with me at that time, I was really sensitive around this particular little place and wasn't taking it well. Like, it was a place where sometimes we can play, but for whatever reason that week I didn't feel like I could play around that.
And you said, I just want you to check in and see if there actually is something going on there for you. And I was driving the car, and I was like, all right. And sure enough, I checked in, and there was a hidden judgment I had of her.
Yeah.
And I brought it out in the open, and I said, okay, I'm judging you that X, Y, and Z. And it was awesome because
Yeah.
I just owned it immediately, and it was really helpful, and it actually turned into this really cool growth experience for me. I was like, holy shit, I didn't even see that was there. It was just kind of unconscious, like,
yeah, it was
acting
very
out.
subtle.
It was very subtle, and she helped me basically take a look at this thing, and it turned into be kind of a bigger thing for me personally. And I went and did a little work around it, and it was super connecting.
And it was relieving for me. I was like, yeah, there was something that didn't feel good, and it was so validating for him to be like, yeah, I do have something in there. And I was, it was just a real nice opening for us.
Yeah.
So
I'm
this is-
so glad you said that. It's often when someone denies that something is there, the intuition is strong, and it has you start to doubt yourself.
Yeah.
And it's one of the most painful things I see in a relationship when people deny, no, there's nothing going on,
Yeah.
is because you're like, oh, no, I'm not crazy. I'm feeling something is there.
Mhm.
And also I want to acknowledge you, Jason, that you said, I'm going to go, I don't know what your exact words were, but you're like, I'm going to go work on this. So you're like, oh, I'm putting this thing out here, and really I've got this thing going on. I'm not going to now dump this in your lap. This is my emotional vomit.
Yes.
But I'm actually, thank you for listening, and now I'm going to go and do my work on that and come back to you as the joyous partner that I know myself to be.
Yeah, we learned a
Yeah.
lot. Mm-hmm.
Can you say a little bit more about, because that very same thing probably happens to a lot of people a lot of times, but they're not able to navigate it in a way that leads to a positive result. Can you maybe dissect it a little bit and see how you were able to move that forward?
Yeah.
I know you've done a lot of work and you have this ability, but
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, I think part of it is that I don't really feel like we have such a good foundation. Like, there's just this trust in that that he really has my back. Like, I really know that Jason is not just judging me secretly all the time. Like, if I was feeling something, it was I just knew I could trust bringing it up. So there's that, and then just also being able to talk about things in a way that I wasn't blaming, I wasn't shutting down, I wasn't being sarcastic or passive aggressive. I just was really genuine, and wow, there's this thing that's been bothering me. It's subtle, but it's having an impact, and just neither of us got really elevated or escalated, and that really helps. Like, I feel like we stayed connected, and we're slowed down enough that it didn't have to become something where we're defending.
Your combo of 3 and 4, I see there. Like, you're no blame, and you're speaking with care and respect. You both were holding responsibility.
Yeah.
Yeah, she invited me in to take a look. She's like, will you just check this out?
Yeah.
Can you check something out? Or can I check something out with you? And that invites me into a conversation as opposed to the walls come up and I'm defending myself. And so, I've also learned that defending myself gets nowhere. So I just like to listen and go and just make sure I'm understanding her. And then I can reflect. I have enough self-awareness to go, well, look at that. I don't know.
Yeah, and had he said, no, there really isn't something there, I would have trusted him. Because again, we've been through this enough, and I don't. That would have been okay too. I could have really taken responsibility for, okay, this is my button, and I need you to be, careful there, or sensitive there. So it could have gone anyway. Yeah.
Yeah, does that
But
help?
it didn't. It could have gone anyway. But like 5 takes us into, you knew your relationship could handle it, and
Yeah.
it wasn't going to be the end of your relationship.
Totally.
No threats
No.
of leaving over this one.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just amazing the just that could have ruined a day, a week,
Right.
and just
Mhm.
being able to diffuse it, it brought you closer together.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And the whole idea of what you guys are up to here, how to use those places of conflict and friction as something that actually you grow, you develop together as a couple, and it serves us. So it's true. It does.
Okay, awesome. Let's get back to the list again, and we have Jacqueline joined us. So Jacqueline, if you have anything you want to add, just feel free to put a comment in the window. We mute you just so that we don't bounce over to your video by mistake. So if you want to be unmuted, just let us know in the chat.
Nice.
Okay, so where were we here?
Number 5 is just no threats, right? We're not going to make threats of leaving, getting a divorce, separating. Maybe we should just get a divorce. Maybe we should just call it quits. I'm tired of this. I'm thinking about divorce, or that kind of language is really damaging to the brain and the way we care for each other. So we're big on no threats.
Yeah.
Pretty straightforward. And there has been a little bit of research here that when we do that, it activates parts of the brain that put us into the fight-flight response. Also if we grew up with a lot of threats, this is kind of compounding that, and it's just sends cortisol through our body, and we get really stressed out, and it's just not helpful.
No.
It's just there's another way to say that, like, hey, I'm really scared that where our relationship's at. I'm in fear about whether I can do, whether I'm strong enough to do conflict with you. We can just take responsibility and talk about how scared we are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Oh, that's so great. Thank you for giving some actual examples of what people can say in those moments. And I just wanted to reference, John Gottman. He's I'm sure you know him. He's one of my favorite relationship researchers. And recently he's been saying that the 2 most critical elements of a long-term relationship succeeding and being a happy one is commitment. So, the commitment that there isn't this leaky energy backdoor of, as I mentioned before, that I don't need this shit, as opposed to this is our shit, what are we going to do about it? But that if you have that commitment, it's just a very different dynamic, and there's a little bit more, a lot more, trust that can be built of that you can go deep into an issue, even particularly because it's not going to be leading to that considering doubting the relationship and doubting being together in the first place.
Right.
Yeah, what was the second thing he said? That was the first. Was that
caring and commitment?
Caring.
Was 2. And of course, you've spoken with the speaking with respect and care as well.
Yeah,
Nice.
it is.
There's one other. Go ahead, Ellen. Were you going to say something?
You're good, Raj. Yeah.
Yeah, there was some other. There's something I really learned. Studying every modality of personal development for the last 40 years.
Nice.
And we spent a lot of time with him over the winter. And one of the things he was coaching me to do was to not sort of get your upset on your partner and expect them to be okay with it. Like if you're going through an upset, like it's your upset. And if you just simply share vulnerably what you're going through, rather than throwing a temper tantrum at them, it completely goes another way. And I found that to be 100% true. And I think that's what you were alluding to there in what you said, that you're sharing vulnerably, hey, I'm going through this space, and checking in like that, rather than reacting out, lashing out at the person. It makes a complete difference.
Yeah.
Huge. Yeah,
Totally
and that's
different.
going to be for some people that's a hard skill to learn. It just takes time.
Mm-hmm.
Because you're used to the pattern in your nervous system is just to lash out.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, number 6.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the next one, start an argument and finish it. So we don't leave things hanging. Again, with children, sometimes we have to come back to things at bedtime. Something starts in the morning, we don't get to complete it. We're going off for our days, or we have a lot to do with our kids that morning or something. But we agree to when we're going to come back. That feels really important to us. Like, okay, when are we going to come back to this? Jason's particularly good at that, and it really helps to have, both of us agree, and then, just at least making sure that you don't leave things hanging. I mean, it kind of speaks to, the saying yes to conflict. It's like, if a little thing happens, you deal with it. But this is also just, sometimes fights will happen and people's pattern is to go a few days not talking, just distancing, and that really creates a bigger problem long term, because it's creating just a experience in the body that of distancing and not learning how to repair, really. So we try to repair quickly, I guess, is what that's about, or at least some level of that. Like, hey, I care about you. Have some moment of connection, even if something is taking us a day to figure out.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say 100% of the time we do this. We don't my experience is we don't leave anything open. We close every loop. And we're just
so great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
so
fantastic. And you know what? It's something you can feel with you. It's the palpable part. Of between the two, that there's an ease. And I think the ease comes when you have the trust. Intimacy is into me, you see. So if you know your partner is telling you if they're upset, they're not biting their tongue until they're going to blow up a few days from now. And so you can have that sense of peace and stability, and you want your beloved, your relationship beloved, to be like your relationship with your home. It's your sanctuary. It's your place that there's nothing hidden and left out, and that there's no, that ease is there. Is what I'm trying to say between the two of you.
Yeah, and we both really recognize more and more the cost energetically to us if there is something unresolved. It's sort of an energetically expensive experience to be in some kind of unfinished business with Jason. So we also want to feel the vitality in our lives from, that we get when we are connected and, we've worked through something. So
yeah, we're like you guys. We want to play, right? And
right.
Play is hard to do when I'm all contracted and there's some unresolved shit between us. So I'm highly motivated to resolve that shit.
Right. The big motivation.
Yeah, highly motivated. I like that. Yeah. Great. Should we look at the last two? That actually, brings us to your number 7, knowing the tools.
Yeah. Stan Tatkin talks about this a lot, which is just knowing your partner and their injuries, and also the tools on what works for them in terms of, okay, I proactively know that, let's see, Ellen doesn't like tone of voice, so if I'm upset about something, I'm going to come to her not having a tone of voice, because that's going to send her into a triggered place, and then I'm going to get triggered because of that, because that's just how my nervous system operates. So if I want to connect with you and have a challenging conversation, I'm really working my tone of voice, and I know that ahead of time, right? Proactively dealing with that.
Yeah, and you guys said something earlier in the interview here about like, oh, do you need some love right now? Like just that sweet comment. It's like that's a personal thing you guys figured out. Like, oh, that helps maybe both of you, helps you both kind of soften, and that's knowing each other and kind of knowing what helps your partner relax, what inspires them. We all have those few things that really only our intimate partner knows, in terms of how to reach each other and how to have them feel safe and understood. What are the words or the gestures that really deliver that to this particular person?
Another quick example is just, I know that it doesn't work most of the time when Ellen comes to me with a problem or a challenge in her life, and I do the kind of guy thing of trying to fix it. I just
Coach, tries to coach
my
me.
coach,
Yeah.
get my badass coach on. It falls
I
flat
can fix it. Get your
every
kids
time.
out. Here I come to save the day.
So it just works a lot better. I know that what works for her is just total listening and then validating, right? I just listen, I get her world, and I validate her experience. And I'm biting my tongue sometimes because I really have this great idea that I know is going to help her, and I just drop it. I'm just like, all right.
And usually, eventually, I ask, like, if I feel understood, then I'm like, okay, what are your ideas? But we got to start with I just need you to get me.
You guys can relate. I can see
Yeah.
some laughing over there, some nodding. Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
Tell about the website you're going to have.
Yeah, I've found in all the years of coaching work that we've done is that the thing that people want most is just to be heard and gotten.
Yeah.
And mostly we don't do that. We wait for people to stop talking so that we can say our opinion about what they're saying. And we have this little, well, Gabby was referring to this website I was going to create, Begotten, where you could just call up and have someone get you.
Let's
That's a
do
good
that.
Right. But we have some little trick thing that we created from the Imago dialogue. Did I get it? Is there more?
Did I get it?
Yeah.
Is there more? Because in the Imago dialogue, we love Imago. We talk about it a lot. But for those that haven't heard of Imago before, in the Imago dialogue in your communication, it's really about listening to each other. And it's all about mirroring what you heard, giving back what you heard, validating their experience so that you understand, even if you wouldn't have that, you understand their experience. They're not crazy. And empathizing, like you can feel the emotion that they are feeling.
Mm-hmm.
And after you've done those pieces, then you want to make sure, like, did I get it and is there more? And I wanted to make sure when I was really upset, I was practicing being a good listener. So I created that dance. Did I get it? Is there more? Did I get it? Not necessarily to do to him, but to think in my mind so that instead of jumping right in to respond or fix it or whatever it is, I would know to pause and to ask, did I get it? Is there more?
Right.
Until I really felt hurt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's something to be said for getting to go all the way to completion with something, with your feelings or your thoughts about something. And we don't always give that or get that, and it really can help, get you through a conflict, to just even have that sense of, okay, I'm done, and thank you,
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really cathartic, and this is just a ninja tip for people out there. If you're able to listen to your partner, and then after they're finished talking, ask them, is there more? They'll be totally blown away.
Yeah.
Because you
Yeah.
have to do that to give people that opportunity.
Yeah, because most people aren't hanging in circles where someone wants to keep listening to them.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, which actually is a nice transition into being vulnerable and dropping into your heart, like being fully heard and fully seen.
Yeah, this is the kind of empathic piece you were speaking to. Is can I just be vulnerable? Can I commit that the next time we're in a fight, to go vulnerable as quick as possible? We kind of had a fun conversation about this the other night. Just that the kind of the first.
Oh, I like that. I got that in there wrong on the screen. I wrote be vulnerable, but I like what you just said. Go vulnerable. That's great. Like the action to it. Go vulnerable.
Yeah, I'm going to go vulnerable as, like, let's have a contest in a way. Like, this could be a playful thing, is whoever goes vulnerable first is going to actually help us get through this thing first, like, quicker, because no one wants to hang out and be upset.
Yeah.
So vulnerability has just got such power to it. If I can soften into my fear or my hurt feelings, my sadness, even soften into some anger a little bit, and let myself feel that there's tremendous vulnerability in even feeling anger and being witnessed in that. So that, I just find that that's really been helpful for us.
Yeah, that I think that particularly works well for you. If we're arguing, and if I can soften and express my kind of more vulnerable feelings, instantly Jason's way more attentive. He's kind of out of coach mode or out of fixer guy, and he's really starts listening. Like there's something else that happens when one of us really shares something that's more raw and more that really needs some care around it. It's kind of obvious when that shifts, and that does help us a lot. It's not an easy one to do, but when I know that there's he's not going to hurt me there, like I have a lot of trust in him over all this time and with all our agreements, so it makes that way more possible.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Mhm.
Awesome. Well, I love that, these are all great tips, but the overall tip here, is making these agreements, and agreements are really just kind of like rules for the game.
Mm.
And as we're here, relationship fun and games, and we really like bringing play to things. And it's just, it's not that you're not going to go out of bounds sometimes, but
Yeah.
Raj and I, we even keep a yellow flag around, and so we'll throw the flag or blow the whistle and say, I call yellow flag on the play. We're going a little bit out of bounds here.
Nice.
And I love that you use the word suggestions, that it's not that this is the path. Like I say, the problem is a path. But there are many paths, and it's different for different couples and even at different times.
Right.
Anything about that top level of like making these agreements, and how you might nuance them to a particular relationship?
Like the question is, nuance these into a particular relationship?
Yeah, how would people apply
Yeah.
Yeah,
them?
just for any of the audiences out there, these are ones that you've come up with. But if someone's sitting down to create their own agreements,
Right.
either again to do on their own or to do with their beloved, how might they go about it?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I guess where I would start is to say, to have the couple, have you, as you're listening, come up with the kind of pain points or the most challenging stuck points in your relationship. Maybe it's about conflict or the avoidance of conflict. Maybe it's about sex. Maybe it's about finances. And see if you can create agreements about how you're going to face those challenges. So identify the challenge and start to create agreements about how you're going to deal with those. Because often we find, if we don't do the agreements thing ahead of time, we find ourselves in the challenge, in the back part of our brain, and we're just sort of acting like a child. So I think it's just wise to
Yeah.
do that.
Yeah, thanks for referencing the brain science. I really appreciate the practicality that, when your lower brain is triggered and you're in that fight or flight response, that's, you don't have access to the frontal lobe, which has empathy and consequences and seeing 3 steps ahead. And, if I say that, then she's going to be really hurt. Then we're actually, that's not what I want, where I want to go.
Yeah.
And that it's going to take having the habits in this form of agreements to avoid from shooting your relationship in the foot.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really presences this being proactive instead of reactive, because that's what happens when our reptilian brain gets triggered. We're in reaction. And like you're saying, if you proactively create these agreements, it's kind of like a lifeline to help you use that incident to, bringing it back to the beginning, to have the problem be the path, not be the problem, not to disintegrate your relationship, but to escalate it.
Right.
Yeah. And Ellen and I worked on some agreements a while back that you can share with the listeners. And if you go to this website, jasongaddis.com/10A, you can have an example of agreements that are in our marriage, and you can riff off those. I like to give like an outline like we just did. And again, like every expert I talk to, every relationship person that's into relationship stuff nods their heads around agreements. Like we all kind of get that it's kind of important.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're just kind of relying on vows and your nervous system and your habits, it's not enough. I just really want to underscore this, that it's good to create agreements and make a date night out of it and have some fun with it. Bring the play into it and have a couple silly agreements too.
Yeah.
I like that, especially in the spirit of the season of play. Bring some silly into it.
Yeah.
Awesome. So we have a few minutes left on the show here. Love all the agreements and tips there. What a great conversation. One thing that we want to share with our guests tonight, with our audience tonight, is our action option.
Yes, we always want to make sure that it's not just a good idea and aha moments. And, if you've been listening carefully, I think we've heard at least 3 or 4 very specific practical things that you want to make sure that you actually take action on them. So this is one action option to take. And Jason and Ellen, if after we review this one, if there's any specific actions, you just had the great one with the date night and come up with your own agreements, but feel free to throw some others in there. But, Raj and I, we bring that kind of Mission Impossible, like, dun, 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 dun. Your action option, should you choose to accept it, But we always like to leave people with an invitation to actually do something, because an aha moment, an insight, it feels good, but it's not what's really going to make a difference. We keep talking about habits, and so really taking some action and making these things a reality is what's of critical importance.
Yeah.
So this particular action option, we'll just highlight the first, a little bit about each step. So first step is ask yourself what a current or repetitive problem is in your relationship. One.
Yeah, we call it the friction factors earlier, right? What's that repeat complaint? We often like to name them, the ones that come up again and again and again.
Right.
Okay, and then the second step, you want to take that actual problem and then translate it into some form of action. You could even make a game out of that and write down, what are the 25, possible solutions or pathways out of this? Or, ask yourself, what is the lesson that this mess, what's the message out of this mess, and how you can apply that to your own personal, as Jason was pointing out before, he took that growth and development on him to himself. So what are you going to do about it? Because you can't tell your partner how to grow. You have to just choose how you want to grow and allow the relationship to evolve and change through your own growth and development. So then step 3.
So you could do steps 1 and 2, and then in the heat of the moment, reptilian brain takes over, and the last thing that you can do is remember what it was that your tools were, or these agreements like Jason and Ellen showed us. So to stack the cards in your favor, what you want to do is make the new path of action as visible and public, if you want to choose that route, as possible. So this could be reminders in your phone. People write things on their mirrors, on your refrigerators. You might enroll support buddies. We actually have a weekly relationship call.
It's every other week, but yeah, with another couple. Couples coaching couples.
Couples coaching couples. You might want to post on Facebook even.
Yeah, one of the other guy, the husband of the other couple that we do our couples coaching couples call every 2 weeks. He takes his relationship goals every 90 days and he posts them on Facebook. It's like really bold and out there. And it's not all the details, but it's the general gist of like what he's taking on, and he wants that public accountability, because the more people that like again, we don't want to be a hypocrite. So we kind of align our lives like, oh, I said this is what I want. Somebody's going to ask me. You hope somebody's going to ask you how that went. And then the final step 4 is just do what you said you would. You build trust. It is crazy, but I know with Raj, like when he doesn't do what he said he will, like it translates to trust in everywhere. I'm like, if I can't trust you to, take out the trash when you said you would, that's such a small thing. How could I trust you for something bigger? We totally collapse these sometimes. So just build that trust. And if you don't do what you said you were going to do, just acknowledge it rather than stepping over it. But if you really want to enjoy bringing in this new perspective, then you can have some peace, play, and passion in your relationship.
Do you want to say anything about the shared relationship vision exercise?
Oh, the shared relationship vision exercise. I just wanted to put a link to that there, because if one of the things you want to do is create beforehand create a context or a description of who your relationship is. It could be what your agreements are. This is an exercise that can help walk you through that. And also, Raj, if you go to the next screen, we'll also have Jason's website, and he mentioned his 10A, which people can go and look at making their agreements as well. Any other action options you want to throw down the gauntlet, invite any of our listeners to take on?
I would just say, in this kind of spirit of play, is how can you bring the play into your relationship? And it might be that the path to play is to address a conflict that's buried under the rug right now. So if you want the play and you want the goodies of fun, can you face what's challenging for you?
Yeah.
And make a commitment and be witness to that. Like you said, you don't have to share it on Facebook, but maybe share it with one other friend that, hey, by the week's end, I'm going to share with my wife this uncomfortable thing that I need to talk about with her.
Yeah, you can't have front of the hand without the back of the hand, so it's all part of it.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Sarah, our moderator, maybe you could put these URLs on the actual episode page so that people can access those easily.
JasonGaddis.com/10A. And of course, oh, I just lost our screen there. There it comes. And then EllenBader.com. And Ellen, just again for those that are the parents out there, the modern moms, what is the URL again for your your moms juggling it all out there?
Yeah, it's rearranged by motherhood.
Rearranged by motherhood. Absolutely, I love that. And so let's go ahead, Raj, jump to the next slide, and we'll take a look at the topic for next week. So this week was Fights Clean Before. Next week will be Sex Dirty Before. You know, how do you really cultivate that sensual relationship, you know, in the day-to-day experience, just in your short interactions, so that you don't have those long, windy on-ramps to intimacy, but it's the easy access, the short on-ramps to intimacy. So when you do find time to get intimate with each other, it's natural, easy, and doesn't feel like you're going from your secular, you know, functional world and now moving into the sacred with any like kind of disjointedness. So we're going to do that with Ben and Jen Rode of the Rode Institute. And they have a website called Explosive Sexual Healing, and they've got some great overall ideas and then some really specific tips. We're looking forward to them sharing as well.
Okay, and we have a few free gifts for you if you want to get in on some of our Relationship Reset Kit goodies. We have our 4-part mini email course, which covers some of our top tips, including the hot and bothered backseat driver and never say never, and a few other awesome tips.
Mastering Many Seductions, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
We also have our free guidebook, which is a condensed version of our ebook, and that gives you a deep dive into Fights Clean and Sex Dirty.
I think there's like at least 12 tips in there for all those different categories.
Great, and you can also get access to our weekly Fights Clean, Sex Dirty TV show replays, and also be informed or stay abreast of our upcoming episodes and the guests that will be on those episodes. And you can do that by going to the URL shown here at relationshipfunandgames.com/get-free-gifts-main, and that will be in the chat window. Okay, and finally, if you want to really dig in and get our ebook, you can go to relationshipfunandgames.com/ebook, and this book is called How to Keep the Fights Clean and the Sex Dirty, the 5 simple steps to solutions that really satisfy.
Yeah, I think there's about 3 dozen of our top tips in there. And again, the layout is really easy so that you can scan and find. You know, we actually ran into a couple recently, and she said, you know, oh, it's, you know, my husband and I, we were having a fight, and I thought, okay, it's Fights Clean During. And she went and grabbed the ebook and found the tips that she needed.
And watched the TV episodes from that,
Just
so she
in that
can
moment.
really get dialed in quickly.
But whatever it is, whether it's our ebook or Jason's website or actual sessions with Ellen, you know, give your relationship the gift of an investment, because a playful, peaceful, passionate relationship, it's possible. And being real, like, life is too tough to do alone, but a crappy relationship is really worse than none at all. And a wonderful one is so worth it. I think we qualified, well, I don't know if I'd say crappy, but certainly messy was where we started from. And I definitely think we're in the awesome to epic category now. But I often tell people when they come up and say something about our relationship, the first thing I say is, it didn't start this way. Because I want people to know they can have it too, and it doesn't just happen by itself. For some people, it does. But for most of us, there's a little bit of work to do before it can get to wonderful. Thank you, too, for being here and for all that you do for couples to get to their own slice of wonderful.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Yeah, it was fun to kick off the season with you.
Yeah, it's awesome. And again, it's just so great having couples, because we do get to, you know, feel that space between the two of you. So thanks. You know, I know you often do your work individually, so thanks for joining us together tonight and for getting a sitter. We know it's dinner time for you and the kiddies there in Boulder. So you have a great night. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
guys.
Thanks again.
Okay.
Be sure to join us next week, everybody, for How to Keep the Sex Dirty Before. Hope to see you there.
Good night.